Hey everybody, so in this video I wanted to talk to you about client expectation management and project management ultimately. This is typically the number one place that agencies get stuck in their operations, where the agency owner ends up being pulled back into the day-to-day, largely why you end up working nights and weekends for a lot of agencies is that the client is ultimately being overly demanding or the timeline is overly restrictive. You end up being really optimistic about how things are actually going to be done and largely end up sacrificing your personal life in order to make things happen. My name is Robert Patton. I work with agency owners every single day to help them systemize the operation so that ultimately that they can scale. I'm looking forward to actually helping you in this video, giving you the top 3 reasons why and ultimately what you can do to solve for this project management problem. All right, so as I was talking about, the first thing and number one thing that you ultimately need to be thinking about when it comes to project management and client expectations is the first thing that ultimately you need to do is you need to sell. You need to sell based on a system. And the issue that ends up happening for loads of instances here is that when you're actually talking to your prospective client is that when you're not selling based on a system, you're actually end up being in a situation where they end up in the place of control in the relationship. And so what you actually want to do is you want to actually walk them through how your agency produces the results for your clients. Have them understand exactly what the different phases or stages to your project actually are. And if you're selling based on this system, you're actually getting buy-in into this process by which you're actually working. And if you actually depict to them and have them understand that this is if they follow this system, they're going to end up having that end result. They're going to want to engage in that system so that ultimately they're really being able to actually have true meaningful result and outcome, because that's ultimately what every single client is there for, is they're actually there for the outcome. And so the other thing that you then want to be thinking about here is you want to be understanding how to manage client expectations. And when you think about this, there's really a couple of different places that are ultimately really, really important here. So the first of which is relatively self-explanatory, is in the project expectations. And so making sure that they understand what they're going to receive and when they're going to receive it. The biggest piece that I see happen when it comes to the proposal stage with a client is that you have all the things that you're going to do, but you actually don't list what items are not included in this scope. Ultimately, the client is going to take a fairly liberal understanding or definition to the things that you're going to be doing in this project. It's in their better interest. But how do you actually allow for that ambiguity to actually be removed? So my suggestion is you actually include exclusions in your proposal so that there's absolutely zero ambiguity as to actually what's happening there. The other thing is at the beginning of the conversation, at the beginning of the project, you want to set communication expectations. How quickly are you going to be getting back to them? How frequently should they be hearing from you? How frequently are you going to be meeting with the client? And what does that look like throughout the course of this project or engagement with the client? So they have a very clear understanding of what's actually going to be happening. So if they don't hear from you for a couple of days, they're not going to be in a nervous place. And how you can actually do that so that they are ultimately feeling seen, heard, understood throughout the entire project. Because largely, that client experience is this piece of it is paramount to the client experience. And if the client doesn't actually feel seen and heard, and they don't feel nice throughout the engagement with you, they're not going to buy onto the next project. They're not going to want to continue working with your agency. And that experience is so incredibly important for that ongoing relationship. The next piece that we actually need to be managing is we need to actually fully manage scope creep. And the thing that is really important here, and this happens across so many different agencies, and scope creep is really, truly a huge problem. And here's kind of the base, really, of scope creep and why it's a problem at so many agencies. One, your team is not armed with what actually is success for this project, what was included and what wasn't. So you've got the client expectations to start, but then you have the team understanding what success looks like for both the client and for the agency so that they can actually be part of the solution to any times things are not going ultimately to plan. So how can they actually adjust for things to allow for them to actually get in line? Largely every single person when they go to work today, their goal is to ultimately have success in what they do. And so how do you arm them with it? the vast majority of agencies are actually hiding information from their team. They're thinking if they know how much we're billing the client, or ultimately how much do we actually have in budget, that ultimately the team is going to ask for more salary. They're going to be wanting to change things. But largely, if the business is profitable and sustainable, they actually have job security. And people actually are going to prefer security before they're actually going to want to look for raises. There's lots of things that you can be doing. And we can talk about the compensation conversation for an entirely other video here. But the thing that's really important here is making sure that the team is armed with what they need in order to actually be successful. And that piece, largely for this component and actually managing scope creep, is understanding what success looks like for the agency. And then from an ongoing basis, the thing that you want to be able to do here, in order to allow for you to be able to manage scope creep yourself, to be able to monitor, measure, and improve what is actually going operationally, is the first is you need to be time tracking. You need to understand where things are actually going. And your project management team, and if you're still the project manager now, know when you're at a 25%, 50%, 75% of your project from hours. What does that actually look like so you can start to actually manage things ahead of time? If you're going largely above those numbers and you're not 25% of the way through the project, what's actually going on? Are you going out of scope? Is there actually truly an issue here? The other thing is actually having a project status report, knowing how many hours are currently on this project, what were the budgeted hours, and what is the actual variance right now. Listing for every single project status of when is the next actual piece, the next deliverable, the next conversation, the next stage of this actual project, and is this project on track, off track, or at risk? Red, yellow, green, largely, right? Is there a problem that you need to be focusing your attention on so that you can look at all the projects across your agency and actually know what's fully going on? And then finally, leverage any mistakes or problems that you have within the agency. And this is really fraught not only in the agency space, but across business in the first place. And actually being able to leverage the mistakes that happen every single day will make your agency tremendously more secure, more profitable, and ultimately allow for your operational systems to move along much more smoothly. So what actually happened that did not go well today, and leverage that situation to augment your process. And the way that you go about doing that is largely in project closure conversations. So at the end of the project, we all have had projects that went swimmingly well and ones that didn't. And for the ones that did, what can we repeat from this project in the next to allow for us to have this type of success again? And for the ones that didn't, what happened on this project? Was it the client communication? Was it our system? Was it our process? What went wrong on this project that ultimately we can change and adapt to allow for it to be better? Looking forward to seeing what you guys are all able to accomplish and seeing in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe.